It's March 6th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the ongoing mass walkout by doctors here in South Korea. The government has begun sending notifications to doctors who are refusing to return to duty ahead of suspending their licenses. Meanwhile, figures indicate that medical schools have asked for a higher number of admissions than the government's planned increase of 2,000. It's Super Tuesday in the U.S. when a large number of states vote in the presidential primary calendar. Tuesday's elections are likely to solidify the rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Bitcoin's price on Tuesday soared to a new all-time high, above $69,000. Experts are hopeful its price could reach higher than its new brief record, while also warning crypto is notoriously volatile. Doctors who have still not returned to duty have now been notified that their license will be suspended. The warning comes as it turns out medical schools have been asking for a higher number of admissions than the government's plan to add 2,000. Kim Bo-kyung reports.
The government gave out warnings that license suspensions would be imminent for the trainee doctors who had not returned to work. The health ministry began on-site investigations at major hospitals on Monday to see how many doctors have defied the government's return-to-work orders. As of 8 p.m. Monday, more than 90% of resident doctors, some 8,900, were still absent from their posts nationwide. 50 major hospitals out of 100 have already been checked in person, with the remaining 50 inspected on Tuesday. Health officials have already secured evidence in relation to 7,000 trainee doctors and plan to notify them that the government will take steps to enforce disciplinary action.
As soon as the violations for not returning to work are confirmed, the government will start license suspension procedures. We are going to issue notices of such administrative measures starting Tuesday.
Doctors will be allowed to defend themselves through statements of opinion delivered over the next 2 weeks before their licenses are officially suspended. The health ministry is also mulling over whether to file a criminal complaint with the police against some junior doctors who led the massive walkout, but the exact details have not yet been decided. Meanwhile, as of Monday, a total of 40 medical schools have reportedly informed the Education Ministry of the exact size of their quota increases. They've asked for an increase of 3,401 students. 930 slots have been requested by 13 schools in Seoul and the surrounding areas, 2,471 elsewhere across the country. This number is much higher than the government planned increase of 2,000 and what was detailed in the surveys the universities had submitted last year. The government said it would promptly allocate students to each school accordingly, saying that such a high figure shows regional med schools' strong will to strengthen regional and essential medical services. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
President Yoon says investments in young people give the best bang for the buck. To empower young people, national scholarship programs and tax breaks for childbirth incentives will be expanded. Kim Do-yeon has more.
The South Korean government is expanding its national scholarship program so that 1.5 million college students will be eligible, up from the current 1 million. That's more than half of slightly more than 2 million enrolled college students. The announcement came as President Yoon held a policy discussion in the city of Gwangmyeong in Gyeonggi-do province on empowering young people.
먼저 청년들이 희망을 가질 수 있어야 나라의 미래도 열어갈 수 있습니다. 청년들이 걱정 없이 공부하고 일하며 꿈을 키우고 미래를 준비할 수 있도록 하겠습니다.
In addition, work-study programs will expand. By 2025, 200,000 students will be able to participate. And a new, quote, housing scholarship will provide students with up to 2,400,000 Korean won annually. That's about $1,800 US. The government will also open up the Youth Leap account to more people. The savings account is for 19 to 34-year-olds earning up to 60 million won or around $46,000, allowing savings of up to $38,000 after 5 years with an interest rate of 6%. The income limit will increase to include more people.
그야말로 재정 투자를 했을 때 투자 효과가 엄청나게 큰 겁니다. 그야말로 청년들에 대한 이런 약간의 투자는 그야말로 돈 되는 장사다 이 말입니다.
President Yoon also emphasized direct involvement of young people in shaping government policy, saying they're able to see the world fairly and just. Meanwhile, it wasn't just about the opportunities, but it was also about the struggles, including single mothers struggling to receive child support from their former husbands.
Especially if the introduction of the advance payment system is introduced, the state will pay child support up front and then ensures that it be collected from the non-custodial parent. I believe it's important to instill a sense of responsibility in non-custodial parents towards their children.
This was President Yoon's pledge during the campaign, and an official from the Ministry of Family answered that relevant ministries are shaping practical measures to make this possible by the second half of next year. Also at the discussion, the government announced that it will not be taxing the childbirth incentives being given by private companies. This is an ongoing effort by the private sector to tackle the current low birth rate. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
China's economic growth target of around 5% was widely expected, which means the country's leaders are more ambitious than ever about regaining confidence and jumpstarting the economy. We turn to Professor Kim Se-won for more this morning. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Professor, is a goal of around 5% achievable, or will it be a smooth journey at least?
Well, Beijing's over 5% economic growth target for this year is an ambitious one. Under China's current economic circumstances, it is not possible without transforming economy as Chinese leaders acknowledges it. But basically, transforming economy means that there will be quite a few bankruptcies of private and public firms, and therefore increasing unemployment. China's economic grew 5.2% in 2023 last year, slightly more than the official target. But the recovery was far shakier than many analysts and investors expected, with a deepening property crisis, mounting deflationary risks, and weak domestic demand. All these cast a gray outlook for this year in Chinese economy. So the real momentum of economic growth in China depends on Beijing's willingness and risk management over declining economy.
That looks like the picture. Now, we have to talk about the fiscal deficit as well. That was set at 3% of economic input, which is also the same target as early last year. What's the reason behind this?
As you said, Beijing set the fiscal budget deficit at 3% of GDP for this year. Mm-hmm. This is lower than the revised deficit of 3.8% of last year, but the same as the 3% target initially announced last year. The size of fiscal deficit basically represents the power of government policy in reviving economy. When government spends more money, it boosts economy in the short run, but the fiscal deficit increases. For solving China's economic problem, because Chinese economy is many government debt level and inflation rates are both relatively lower than other countries. So Beijing's policy toolbox is constantly being enriched. It means that Beijing's fiscal, monetary, and other policies have relatively large room for maneuvering, and there are conditions for intensifying the implementation of fiscal policy.
Right, Professor Kim, inflation and the soaring prices have been such a headache for the rest of the world, pretty much. But what's interesting is that China has turned out to be one of the few major economies to see the complete opposite, falling prices or deflation. What does this mean for China?
Deflation or declining general price is almost the first experience in China since it joined WTO in 2001. Mm-hmm. So Chinese governments, households, and corporations are very much embarrassed with this unprecedented situation. Basically, the deflation in China was originated from weak demands for goods and services, represented by slower economic growth. Recent data in early 2024 had suggested Chinese economy was starting with persistent deflationary pressure, which makes people to spend less. When prices go down, people just delay purchase of goods and services because they buy later at a lower price. This is something very scary part of deflation, which worsens Chinese economy further by decreasing households' consumption. So controlling the deflation would be one of the largest challenges of Beijing for this year.
Right, before I let you go, Professor Kim, starting this year, there will no longer be a press conference at the end of the country's National People's Congress. Now, China appears to be wanting to keep a lot of things to itself, including the unemployment rate. Some are even discouraging investment in China. Why such a lack of transparency?
That is a very sensitive issue in China. Actually, there is a famous word about Chinese government data. Former Prime Minister Li Keqiang used to say that he even does not believe China's official data. Mm-hmm. And the head of Chinese government statistics office is abruptly fired several years ago because it is believed that he released inappropriate data to Chinese government. Beijing basically controls all data release because they think that unfavorable data worsens the economic situation further. This is something Beijing's management policy of the government. Recently, China's young unemployment skyrocketed, and Beijing has decided not to release the unemployment data for a while. But this hiding data strategy weakens foreign investors' trust in China and foreign investment.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your insight. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, we apologize for the audio difficulties during the interview. Millions of Americans are currently casting ballots to select their presidential candidate in crucial Super Tuesday contest. Now, after Super Tuesday, the candidates for the final run for the White House, most likely between Biden and Trump, will be clear. Choi Min-jung reports.
It's Super Tuesday over in the U.S., the biggest day of the 2024 presidential primaries or caucuses. On March 5th, voters from 15 states and 1 U.S. territory are choosing their presidential candidate, with the largest number of states voting on the same day in the presidential primary calendar. California and Texas, the most populous states in the U.S., are among the 15 holding the nominating contests. Over a third of the total delegates, which are awarded to the most popular Republican and Democratic candidates, are up for grabs. Super Tuesday usually offers a glimpse into which candidates will run in the final race for the White House. But there's much less suspense this year, as both parties already have a clear sense of who will be running in the race: Joe Biden for the Democratic Party and Donald Trump for the Republicans.
I think we really need somebody, a super strong figure in the White House for international relations.
He's a fraudster. He's been accused of sexually abusing a woman and found guilty of that. He's got over $500 million worth of fines and penalties.
After Super Tuesday, the two rivals are likely to head towards a rematch in the general elections in November. According to AP projections, Biden won the Democratic caucuses in Iowa in the first projected result of the day. Trump's only rival in the Republican nomination race, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley, is widely expected to drop out of the race with defeat to the former president looming. Meanwhile, on the big day, Facebook, Instagram, and other Meta platforms suffered an outage spanning multiple countries, including the U.S., the UK, and Canada. It now appears to be fixed. The U.S. government said it could not confirm whether it was related to attempts to disrupt voting, but was closely monitoring the situation. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The price of Bitcoin, the largest cryptocurrency by market cap, hit a new all-time high on Tuesday. Now, many remain optimistic that the cryptocurrency may reach new highs driven by the spot ETF approval. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The price of Bitcoin continues to soar, this time reaching an all-time high on Tuesday. According to U.S. crypto exchange Coinbase, the price of one Bitcoin hit $69,115 as it surged 4% in 24 hours. That meant the largest cryptocurrency by market cap surpassed the previous record of $68,990 set in November 2021, before profit-taking led to prices falling below $60,000 at one point. Still, Bitcoin has surged 160% since last October and has risen more than 40% in February alone. Bitcoin has also gone up nearly 400% since November 2022, when it plummeted to the $16,000 range due to the collapse of the Terra USD and Luna, as well as the bankruptcy filed by virtual currency exchange FTX. Bitcoin's all-time high was largely driven by the U.S. regulators' approval of the spot exchange traded fund and large-scale capital inflow through it. In January, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission approved 11 spot ETFs applied by BlackRock, the world's largest asset management company. According to Bloomberg News, since the introduction of the Bitcoin ETF, the net inflow through BlackRock and Fidelity Investments amounted to $7.35 billion. But also driving up the prices is the Bitcoin halving in April, with the total supply of Bitcoin set at 21 million, of which 19 million have already been mined. Once the split occurs, the rewards given to miners will also be reduced by half. Some economists say that the easing of sentiment toward risky assets, the New York stock market hitting an all-time high, and the expectation that the U.S. Fed will cut interest rates all contributed to Bitcoin's rise and may continue to push its prices higher. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
An appeals court in Montenegro has overturned an earlier decision to extradite Terraform Labs co-founder Do Kwon to the U.S. to face fraud charges. The appellate court's website on Tuesday showed that it accepted the disgraced crypto entrepreneur's appeal and decided to send the case back to trial. The court said there was no clear and reasonable basis for the earlier decision over whether South Korea or the U.S. submitted the extradition request first, raising the possibility that Kwon could be extradited to his home country. The High Court in Podgorica earlier ruled that Kwon should be extradited to the U.S. where he's facing fraud charges.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in Gaza, where the 3 days of negotiations with Hamas over a ceasefire in the region have failed to achieve a breakthrough. The failed attempt comes less than a week before the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan that often heightens Israeli-Palestinian tensions linked to access to Al-Aqsa Mosque, a major holy site in Jerusalem. Over the past 2 days, international mediators, including the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar, have been pressuring Hamas to provide a list of hostages that they will release as the initial move in a phased ceasefire agreement with Israel. However, Hamas has refused to provide such a list, and the two sides are also far apart on other aspects of any deal. The UN says a comprehensive ceasefire is crucial as a quarter of Gaza's population is facing starvation. Meanwhile, the Hamas negotiators agreed on Tuesday to stay for at least one more day of talks. Moving over to Russia, where the chief of the Kremlin's Foreign Intelligence Service said Tuesday that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny died of natural causes when asked about whether any forces in the West had been involved in the death of Vladimir Putin's most prominent opponent. Russian spy chief Sergei Naryshkin said sooner or later life ends and people die, adding that the vocal reactions in the West to Navalny's death were revolting. The head of Ukraine's defense intelligence said in February that Navalny died from a blood clot, denying speculation that he was killed while in prison. Navalny died last month at the age of 47 in an Arctic prison. His supporters alleged he had been murdered. The Kremlin has denied involvement in his death. Over to Germany, Tesla's European Gigafactory in the country's capital, Berlin, has halted production after a fire broke out at a nearby power pylon. Police investigations are being carried out with the suspicions of a possible arson attack. Local media had published a letter claiming responsibility for the suspected arson attack from the website of a far-left militant group called the Volcano Group. Emergency services have extinguished the blaze, and power to the surrounding communities has mostly been restored. The outage and shuttered production are expected to cost Tesla hundreds of millions of euros. Over 100 illegally trafficked poisonous frogs have been released back into the wild in Colombia. Bogota's Ministry of the Environment oversaw the relocation of the endangered toxic frogs from the Colombian capital back to their rainforest habitat. Last month, a Brazilian woman had been caught at an airport in Bogota trying to smuggle the frogs into Brazil. According to local police, the endangered species is sought after in international markets by collectors who pay up to $1,000 per frog.
Good morning. Parts of the East Coast and Jeju are having a rainy start to the day, and these wet clouds will continue to drop on and off spotty rain throughout the day today. Now, mountainous regions in Gangwon-do need to brace for more winter storm with up to 8 centimeters in the forecast, while a heavy snow advisory was lifted a couple of hours ago, but do stay on high alert. It's a tad chillier start to the day. Then highs will be similar to yesterday in central regions, topping out at 11 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Gwangju at 14 degrees, as southern provinces will notice highs going 1 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday. It will get cloudier as the day goes on today. Meanwhile, parts of the Jeju and the south coast are under a strong wind advisory. More wet and cloudy weather is in the forecast for tomorrow in central parts of the country. Then sunnier conditions return just in time for the weekend along with spring cold. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We will be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.